Welcome to another conversation in People in Fundraising. This podcast features interviews with nonprofit professionals who discuss their career journeys, lessons learned, and enthusiasm for working in fundraising. And here is your host, the founder of People in Fundraising, Tim Wilson.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another conversation in the People in Fundraising podcast series. And today is Wednesday, November 2nd, 2022. And I'm delighted today to welcome Steve Grimes to our program. Steve, how are you?
Yeah, I can't complain. Tim, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. It was great to spend about 10 minutes with you before we went on record, just chatting and laughing and talking through the conversation today.
I was dumbfounded at the level of talent your daughter has to create what I see behind me, which is a complex picture for a child to be creating. So dude, she has some talent there, man.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, my daughter Amelia made this at school recently.
Great.
So
that's cool.
Thank you.
It's cool.
Yeah, Steve is the Assistant Director of Data Insights at the Helen Brown Group, which is one of the best regarded and longest tenured consulting firms in the nonprofit prospect development industry. And thank you again for being here today, Steve. It's great to see you, and I appreciate you making time for our conversation.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I guess I should give mention before I was at the Helen Brown Group. I was working for New York City's mayor's office. I was the assistant director of data analytics there and served some time there during COVID, actually.
Oh, wow.
Just as COVID ticked up, I joined in that April. One of the best jobs I ever had in my life, and one of the hardest jobs I ever had in my life. But
I'm sure
it was an honor to just be able to serve my home, right? So it's lots of emotion there, particularly at that time. And then before that, I was at Jazz at Lincoln Center. I was the director of the development analytics and strategy, I believe was the title.
Okay.
That was also a cool gig. And then before that, I was I was the prospect research analyst at the ACLU.
Okay.
Yeah, and I joined that job just as the Trump administration was coming into office. So that's when ACLU's sort of identity as an organization really started to change, right? Because they were forced to, because of that election. And then before that, I was in academia. I was working towards a PhD in sociology at Rutgers. I am a proud PhD dropout. It was not for me. It may be in the stars at some point, but it's not there for today. But I started my career in prospect research in 2006 with St. John's University here in Queens, and I was a prospect researcher there for about 5-6 years before I'm where I am here today, actually. So it's actually full circle, because I remember when Helen used to give those blogs, because she had just started the company around the time, and she was really leveraging the internet for those blogs in a way that was sort of ahead of her time, right? And giving this information out that was inspiring and really cool, right? So I remember as a person coming into the industry, reaching out to Helen and just asking questions here and there, and she always responded. Was always nice, always gracious, and to just be at a place today where I am now running a division within her company is actually, it's a real honor. That's really super cool. So that's how where I am today.
Very cool. That's a very diverse professional background. You talked about universities, ACLU, Jazz at Lincoln Center, the mayor's office, now in nonprofit consulting. That's really, really cool.
For me, it's just a jumble of memories. So I could totally see how when I say these titles, folks go like, "Whoa, that's neat," and I go, "Yeah, I guess it was. It was a lot." Yeah, it was a lot. So yeah, I appreciate that, Tim. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to touch on a few of those stepping stones before we get into the written questions you have. You mentioned studying sociology, and were there elements of looking at data as part of your studies that really spoke to you and resonated with your skill set? And then how did you take those skills and passions for data insights, data science,
Yeah.
and apply those to the nonprofit field?
So, well, two great questions, Tim. I'll try to keep the first part not too heavy and get to the second part, which is the more technical aspect of things. So, like, I guess growing up as a child, so I moved a lot when I was young. So up until I want to say I was about 15 or so, I was always in sort of a liminal space, in a place where I saw myself as a person, but never part of the group around me. So I kind of always grew up curious about other human beings.
Yeah.
Right. And like trying to understand other human beings, because for so long I didn't have that. Right. So I initially went into psychology, actually, and psychology wasn't giving me the answers that I wanted. And I took like a social psychology course, and I was like, "Oh, groups, right? Human beings love groups. Okay,
yes,
that's what I should be like studying." And just ultimately fell in love with sociology after that point, and anything sociology adjacent. Not that any academic who is in any other discipline that would ever even think to say themselves as adjacent to sociology. They are their own things. Academics an interesting place in that sense. But so like cultural studies, feminist studies, that sort of thing, critical race theory, that anything that is adjacent to that, I kind of sort of fell into. However, when I left Rutgers, what I really kind of got from my time there that really sort of applied to like the day-to-day job is the idea of what it means to do social research, or what it means to do actual research, right? Like what it means to do to structure your research question in a way in which an answer can be given to prove a thing. Right.
Yeah.
Right. So like the conceptuals of what it means to actually do analytics. Right. So like the zeros and ones to say that I will do a regression model, to say I'll do a decision tree, to say I'll do cluster analyses. All these things are great to do. Say I'm gonna, be doing machine learning and yada 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 yada. All those things are excellent. Like they are unbelievable tools to essentially get to the finer nuances of any question, right? But there is something to be said about setting up conceptually what you're actually going to study, so that when you do get the zeros and ones, that is coming from conceptually the right place. And over time, I've been able to kind of connect the idea of like having good research design to like what it means to have good strategy, or any strategy within an organization, right? Because the strategy or the strategic plan comes from you conceptualizing the thing that you want to do, right?
Sure.
And like in the way that matters for the organization, right? And then you can tie that to sort of like, hey, now we want to ask questions about these goals and these things that we want to do. And we've conceptualized it this way. Then you go to sort of where the analytics lays, and you go like, all right, well, then how can we prove whatever people are asking? Well, how have they conceptualized it? Great. Well, how do we now use techniques that actually speak to that conceptualization, right? So then when you get the zeros and ones, everything now is tied to back to the strategy, back to the way you conceptualize things, back to the work itself, and you have this loop, right? Tim, that took me, I want to say, I left the program in 2016. I
Okay.
want to say that clicked for me as of like last year.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Like it took a while to kind of get why is it that like some of the things that I've learned in my program or my time, as a social researcher are not clicking to sort of the loop that's taking place within the professional aspect of things.
Mm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I want to say as of last year, it was like, oh, okay, right. If the strategy doesn't work, then we're not conceptualizing the analytics properly. And if we're not understanding the analytics properly, then we're not giving people the zeros and ones that matter to what they think they're trying to do. And then
Sure.
so yeah.
Well, thank you for that. And I think as I was listening to you, Steve, it gels with one of my questions for you, and it's actually a quote um, from the famous jazz musician Miles Davis, and he said, "quote Sometimes you have to play a long time to be able to play like yourself." And
Yeah.
just hearing your really um, fascinating and enthusiastic description of the concept, the theory, drafting the questions to um, and conceptualizing that with the loop of
Yeah.
then the analytics, and
Yeah.
it took you until last year.
Yeah.
So that again, that really, in my mind at least, it connects to what Miles Davis said.
Well, to my credit, not that I need to be doing this. I kind of lost 2 years because of COVID.
Oh,
Three, if you think about like the fact that
yeah,
in my head COVID still exists. But yeah, no, that still doesn't take away from the fact that like no, it took a while. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And so, share with us if you can what it felt like, professionally and as a human,
Mm.
when it all clicked. And was there a specific moment when it just was like, okay, this is all coming together?
That's a good question, Tim. I mean, you never really know when it starts to click,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like hitting, like you can hit a stride and things get easier, but there is something about like something getting easier and when like you're able to see things from like a 30,000 foot view,
Mm,
right? Like things can get easier in a sense of like on a ground level when you're like, hey, I get up, I go to work, I don't get stressed out at work doing a particular thing. Like my life is on this ground level is easier. But when it
yeah,
clicks, you're able to look at your entire life, not just like that aspect of work, right? And how like work, affects other things within your life in terms of your family, in terms of your friends, in terms of how you see yourself, right? And like,
yeah,
and it's clicked. And now you're just like, you're looking at all the pieces and things just kind of just happen for you. So like to get to that point is like from at least from my perspective, I never know when it's about to happen. I just
yeah.
know that like at some point it will if you can kind of just stay at it. It's something I've actually had difficulty with for much of my life until like I've kind of just gotten older and you just start to kind of understand like, hey, if you can just stick with the thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? After a while, it just doesn't have the sting as it once did. And on top of it, you get the opportunity to learn all the stuff that's connected to it. I know that like we're getting super meta and
That's
sort of super
fine.
cosmic here, but like there's something to be said about like that journey that I think all of us have to go on ever so often when it comes to growth that way, right?
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
that like, hey, like in the moment, it may not seem as if you have the skill sets to handle the thing, but like maybe you just want to kind of give it a second.
Definitely. Definitely. And that resonates with me, where for many years I was mostly doing reactive prospect research
Mm,
and aspiring to take on more responsibility, manage a team, and get
mm,
into portfolio analysis.
mm.
Um, and all of that did come, but it necessitated a move across the country, which had its own, personal,
Yes,
professional
yes,
implications and
yeah,
adjustments.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
Yeah.
And so sometimes you just need to go through the process. You really do need to go through get through the other side of it, right?
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would think I'd be remiss if I didn't ask Steve, what was it like for you in hindsight now to have worked in the mayor's office during COVID in one of the hardest hit metro areas during the pandemic? And what were your responsibilities?
Yeah, so while there, I was responsible for navigating the office's analytic portfolio. So I was essentially the through line between the data scientists and leadership.
Wow. Okay.
So, leadership would come up with issues to solve. Um, I provide insight towards how we actually get things done. Data scientists do the thing through my sort of direction. And essentially I serve as liaison to that group and the leadership.
Okay.
So yeah. So for the past, how long have we been speaking now? For the past 10 minutes, I seem extremely chatty and we'll talk about anything. And with this question, you've actually stunned me because I don't think I've fully come to terms with my time in the city.
Yeah.
So I talk about sort of my experiences as a child moving around, and I settled in New York, right? So my identity became what it means to be a New Yorker, right?
Yeah.
Ask me to say coffee or dear, right? Like you hear the Queens in my voice, right? Because I lived
Yeah.
in Queens pretty much all my life, right? And to be at a point where I knew my work was going to help and was helping other New Yorkers during a really dark time in New York is absolutely wild to me. Like nuts, Tim. Right.
Yeah.
Like you can't imagine the way that I saw myself pre that job, right? To be there at that moment to kind of go, whoa, this is wild. Right. So the experience itself was extremely emotional. Right. And I don't think I ever came to terms with that emotion in a way that was healthy after COVID started to be less of a thing. Because the intensity of the job went away in a way that was really rough. It was just really rough, and I was not able to come to terms with how city government works. To be able to be successful in that job long term, because we were working in a crisis moment. At that time, government wasn't government between April and about almost September in New York. Because there was a push to get Christmas as a thing, right? And not necessarily where we were doing stuff, but because they had the oh my gosh, Tim, they had the New Year's Eve ball drop during that time, right? It was it I need to actually, after we're done with this, I need to go back and check the wiki of when they did the ball drop, because I remember the ball drop was it just felt like tone deaf.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. It's just like it was like, wow, okay, we're gonna do this. Right. But so there was, I think, this public push, not just like by government, but like public push for like wanting to get back to normal, particularly as Christmas was rolling around. So by the time September hit, we were starting to do more government-y things that, I wasn't a public sector guy. So kind of seeing that world and seeing how things actually worked, and the level of autonomy I had or didn't have, or just the way politics with a big P worked. I worked for the mayor's office, right? So that was rough. That was rough. That was rough. That was real rough. So the journey back to fundraising is one of like, I need to come back to my safe space.
Sure.
I need to come back to my people. My people know how I am, and I love being around my people, kind of thing. So it has been really great in that way. Sometimes the grass isn't greener, right?
Sure. And Steve, you've been at the Helen Brown Group in your role as the Assistant Director of Data Insights for about a year.
Yep.
Is that correct? So
Yeah.
talk with us about what it's been like to come back, as you said, if I can use your phrase, to come back to your people, to come back to private sector. And you've presented numerous times. You're generous with your enthusiasm and your knowledge in our community.
Yeah. I mean, it's been great, Tim. I mean, I've been able to go to some conferences and just like reconnect with folks I haven't seen in years.
Yeah.
People that are very close to me at this point, now knowing them after these amount of years. And there's an energy that you get with that it's just a beautiful thing, right?
Sure.
So like that's been absolutely great. The work I've been doing has been absolutely great. I don't have another word for it. Great is the best thing I can think of right now. But I'm working with organizations that I would have never thought I would have worked with at any point in my career, right? Serving as a trusted partner with our clients in that way is also sort of like, oh, this is also wild, but okay, cool. I'll roll with this. This is nice. The consulting aspect of things is still tough for me, right? I've always worked in a brick and mortar organization, so I am currently trying to navigate the space of what it means to be a consultant. I think I have landed on I'll just talk to you as a human being and we'll just see how that works, right?
Yeah.
And that's sort of been working out, I think. But we'll see how that goes. So like the return is like return. Like I've never left, right? In that way also, right? I mean, I don't think I could have, right? I stumbled into this job in one of the most stumbly ways that you can kind of just stumble into a job, as most of us have, right? No one goes to school, right, to be a prospect researcher. We should have a whole degree or a whole college or something. Maybe that'd be pretty cool. So like it almost feels like really natural in that sort of way of just like, this feels right. That said, philanthropy is still what philanthropy is. Frustratingly, from a DEI lens, it is still frustrating on a innovation lens, right? In terms of us as professionals, what are we actually adding to the field to actually change it and to enhance our abilities all in the same while enhancing the organizations that we're with. There are tons of reasons for both of those things that are both complicated and deep, and probably not within the time limit that we have for this podcast for you to have me go on a rant about that. But we still have the environments that we do within philanthropy that not just make our jobs difficult in the way of growing it, and then make philanthropy what it is in terms of an outgrowth of capitalism in some sort of way, right?
Sure.
That makes our jobs what they are still. So there is the absolute elation of being around people that I love, but the job is still the job sometimes, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's true. I would like to touch on, if you feel comfortable, Steve, like just voicing some of those frustrations. We have about 20 minutes still in the
all right.
Conversation.
Thank you for okay. All right, beautiful. Because I need to distill this down in 20 minutes. that is definitely a Steve problem, not a Tim problem. I mean, I'll start with the innovation. because I think the DEI aspect of things is tied to this. Again, on top of other sort of stuff that comes along with this.
Definitely.
So it is frustrating for me as a data professional also to know that our jobs, what we are, at the crux of it, are information brokers, and we are all data professionals. And we are scoped in the ways that we are many times in our organizations that does not allow us to have ways of thinking that put us in a position to be thinking like data professionals.
Interesting.
Right? And it is frustrating to see it, to know that there are so many intelligent people who are working within our industry, who are continually within organizations that just see us as the people who do some Googling to get phone numbers.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And as far as we have come as a niche profession, since I started, it is still disheartening to kind of hear the stories that you hear.
Yeah.
Right? And at large, well-known organizations many times, right? It's frustrating.
Definitely.
And from an innovation perspective, right, that does something to people, right? They come to work and they don't want to do more because they see the problems of doing more, right? And who wants to deal with that, right? You know, we talk about work-life balance, right? And folks have lives and families and their own energies to maintain, right?
Yeah.
And like, there is labor involved in what it means to be doing all of that extra work just to have people to kind of justify your existence.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? You know, so like, it is just disheartening to see, sort of, from my perspective, this is me speaking, my perspective, the reasons why there seems to be a lack of innovation within our field. Right? And that how innovation seems to be the realm of our vendors. I love our vendors.
Yeah.
You know, if it wasn't for LexisNexis, we wouldn't have jobs.
Absolutely.
All right. All right. So like, we understand our relationship with our vendors, and our vendors are great. But it is troubling to see when things are where there are innovations within our field, they always seem to be within some sort of private equity. And it is troubling to see that because we work within a nonprofit industry.
Well said.
And our jobs are to help people. And this is not to say that everyone who gets a paycheck from this should be like looking at it as a career and a thing, and that's your guiding light. I'm not imposing that on everyone. But like, hey, that doesn't take away from my ability to criticize you because you are not necessarily helping if you're not recognizing that we work within the nonprofit industry.
Correct. Yeah.
Right? So it's for me, it's just sort of just one of those things, just like, there are structural issues to us innovating, which then puts us in a place where I'm trying to have conversations with folks about like what it means to be doing DEI work within our day-to-day. And I am, just like everyone else, just trying to come up with solutions of like what do you actually do on a ground level? You know, I look at our landscape and I go, I don't know how the prospect research analyst whether they are educated about DEI principles or not, right, which is a whole other thing, right?
Sure.
That we talk about. But we'll put that to the side for now. And then realize that prospect research analyst also has a whole structure at their organization to have to engage with that is likely already not going to be open to DEI principles in various ways, but also understands the structural things that they have to deal with, right? To go and sees that effort and goes, okay, I'll just keep giving you these profiles.
Absolutely. I've experienced that myself.
Yeah.
Without going into a lot of detail. Yeah.
Yeah. We all have. We all have. Like my explanation here is oddly specific, right? Right? It's the thing. It's the thing, and it's the sort of thing that I actually have to balance as a professional in this field, because it's like I see that and I know all the things that come along with that, and it's troubling. And then I see my love of this profession, the love of the people, and it's just like, all right, it's just a constant balance. It's just a constant balance. So
yeah, a lot of, and it is just my term, but like trying to reconcile that love and that passion with what you see structurally, the private equity piece that you talked about earlier, where innovation is coming through that channel.
Yeah.
Complicated.
And it really is. And Tim, we stand at a point, you've been doing this for a long time too. We stand at a point where it was changing in like 2000s, in the early 2000s, right? Because the internet was being more and more of a thing.
Yeah.
Right. So the face of prospect research was really starting to be more integral to departments at that time, right?
Yeah.
And we stand at another point where prospect research is changing, right? Now it is the data revolution, right? In terms of like recognizing that all organizations should have data protocols and ways that truly integrate with the strategy, right? You are going to be left behind if you don't have any sort of understanding of analytics within your organization, right? Like it is clear, right? So that in itself is now pushing a certain amount of innovation within our field, but it is coming from a particular place. And like, not all of these folks are good actors, in a sense of being connected to the work that we do. Right. And the further you get from the work, how can you as another human being understand the things that we care about? So there's a change coming that like I am not sure what is going to happen over the next 10 years in this field. All right. And where the power dynamics are going to kind of rest when like this next change comes.
Yeah. And as you were talking, Steve, I was just reminded, Nathan Chappelle, who's I don't know if I should know better, and I apologize. I don't know if he co-authored a book that's coming out, The Generosity Crisis, or the author. But just this morning on LinkedIn, he posted about a conversation with a retiring philanthropic leader, and he signed off by saying, sending love to all of the people that are waking up each day and trying to make the world a better place through the nonprofit work. And so it is that awareness, as you mentioned earlier, that again, the love of the people, the missions of our nonprofits to some degree, but these changing dynamics and complicating factors that impact the work we do is really tough.
Absolutely. I couldn't do this work at an Amazon or a Google or wherever else. Like I need to know that like my, sweat and blood and tears is going to something. I think, many of us who do this work can at least when things get rough, you can always come back to that and go, all right, I know I'm helping somebody.
Yeah.
I know I'm helping somebody. And that keeps you grounded. So
yeah, and I think I may have missed an important term that Nathan used when I just paraphrased him, but he talked about the burden of making the world a better place.
Yeah. Love that. Hey, this is a good time to pat myself in the back. It is a burden. Yeah, thank you. Love that. It's great.
Yes. Yeah. And it just, my mind just goes to trying to find linkages to conversations and stuff I see on LinkedIn from people that I admire either from a distance or I know the person. So Yeah. So Steve, we've got about 10 minutes left, and there's a couple of things just from like the human side of the people I talk to that I'd love to get your thoughts on, if that's okay.
Yeah, no, I'm surprised I haven't been human enough. I'm happy to be human more here. If you
You meant totally candid and human, so thank you. But one of the things you touched on talking about the previous subject matter with DEI and other topics was that we're all humans. We step away from our jobs to put energy towards our own selves, our family. So for you, typically, how do you decompress after a work day? Is it exercise? Do you have a routine? Is it time with family? Is it reading?
That is a good question, man. So here's the thing. I recently learned that decompression is not about the activities that you actually do.
Mm.
And it's more about how you organize those activities.
Oh.
Right? So it's less about the content and more about when that content actually happens and how you conceptualize that content.
Right? Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, no, Tim, I'm in a weird meta place right now. So like
that's fine.
So think about it as like you have a bunch of activities throughout the day, a bunch of things that you're responsible to, a bunch of identities that you have to connect with at any given time, right? And there was a time where I got this advice and it didn't hit at the time. And the person was essentially saying, you have to learn how to you have to learn to put things into boxes, compartmentalize. I never pronounce that's as good as I should be. But put things in boxes, right? And you have to learn how to put things in boxes. I never clicked into that. You talk about the click in, right? I've clicked into that piece of advice up until I want to say recently, where what you're doing is not necessarily saying, hey, things need to be in neat boxes, but you are putting things in boxes so that you can actually recognize your autonomy to do so.
Oh, okay.
Right? So you are now going to those boxes as person, human, who is dealing with activity. And you have to do the activity in a very particular way so that this activity can stay within its box. And this stays within this box. And this was stay. And it wasn't explained to me that way. It was explained to me as, oh, just put things into boxes. And I'm like, man, that seems morbid. But ultimately, you're putting things into boxes so that you are doing the task of organizing. Right. Yeah. So decompression, I'm learning actually that decompression is not about like, oh, okay, so today I'll do spin, and that day I'll do hiking, and that day I'll play 6 hours of Elden Ring, and just like it's do it for this day with this mood, with this vibe. And it's more just like, how about you kind of zoom out and actually just see how your activities are kind of lined up with each other, and recognize that ultimately, like, hey, some things are not lined up in the way that they need to be, or with the analogy, some things are in boxes that don't really need to be in the box that they're in, or organized in the way that they are, so that you take the pressure off of like rushing to decompress after work, because you've kind of conceptualized work in a way that allows you to not have it be a stress ball or a really bad box. Again, going back to the
I like that.
You see what I'm saying? So like so then what happens is that you are now organizing your work in that way. You're organizing everything in that way, so that decompression becomes like a flow state rather than it is a thing that happens at any point. Now, Tim, I'm telling you all of this. I am a mess at this. I'm so bad at this. like my flow state is horrible, right? But like I do understand the mechanics of it.
Yeah.
I've been trying it out and trying to figure that out. So like you asking what I do to decompress after work, I don't know. I think I'm just organizing things better.
Well,
Organizing things helps with just decompressing. So
yeah.
yeah.
Well, and as you were talking, Steve, I was thinking about my own typical routine during the end of the day, end of the work day, and it varies, but you're right. As you were talking about rushing to an activity to decompress, I thought about, the many times that my daughters get home from school at 3:30 or so, and they want to go right to the gym in our town. And because they've got a church activity or they've got a job and it starts at 6 o'clock. And so they've got this narrow window of time. I'm their mechanism to get them to the gym. I want to go myself. But I loved how you described that, because it really resonated with me, where I'm like forced to, in the moment, like mentally say, okay, I'm going to come back to my job at home and finish that time and that task. And I got to rush out the door right now because they're on a schedule. And it actually isn't really enjoyable. So
you got it. Absolutely. And that's, and what happens in that situation is that you never have an opportunity to make moments mean for you, because you're always rushing with time and not working with it. And
that's great.
And it's not to say that, like, again, I'll be the first to say there are histories, there are spaces, there are environments, there are structures that can go ahead and filter all of that way of thinking about yourself as an autonomous person. And like those things have to be acknowledged. Yeah. But when you do have the opportunity to see those mechanics, you do realize like, oh, hey, there might actually be an opportunity for me to, at the very least, try to organize this stuff in a way where I am trying to make the moment mean for me. And, what I found, Tim, as time is going on, is that like the concept of trying, the act of trying in itself is me actualizing, manifesting something, right? And like I'm making that moment mean for me. So like that process of trying doesn't feel like a labor, right? Like it once did. If it feels like, no, like I'm just moving towards something, and hell, the fact that I can do this is wow.
Yeah.
Right? So,
well, I think even just being cognizant of that and working towards that flow that you talked about is an important step.
Yeah.
Because as you were describing it, I was connecting it to my own life and thinking, there needs to be a radical shift in how I organize my time and give space to the different identities.
And you know what, Tim? You know what that is? That's your girls, right? My girls, I will say, have helped me start to understand that, right? Because so like that way of thinking about yourself as subject and object, organizing a thing, right? And like doing that in your head, in your physical space, you have your girls to continually remind you subject object, right? Not that your girls are object, but they are subjects themselves. But like you can't help as another human being to do subject object, right? So like so when that happens, you start to realize like, wait, you're either learning from osmosis or you're learning from me saying it, but like you're learning, right? Okay, I gotta at the very least pay attention to what I'm doing here and hope for the best. And like, so and it for me with my girls, it took well into like, I want to say my youngest was about 7 or 8 before it clicked of like that clicked, right? Of just like, oh, okay, right? And you change course, you go like, all right, no, I need to stop showing you this. You need something.
Yes.
Right? Right. So it's to be able to be in a place where you're able to kind of go, wait, I got to fix something. I truly believe it's your girls, man. Because like,
yeah,
I feel like that was what it was for me, at least.
yes. Oh, so cool.
Yeah.
This has been such a great and wide-ranging conversation, Steve. Thank
Yeah,
you.
Tim. No, Tim, this has been great. This is like a cool conversation, man. I could like do this with you forever, man.
I'm always open to coming back for round 2s or round 3s.
Yeah. Absolutely. I like let's get even more meta with it, man. Let's go out there. Absolutely. I love this. Great.
Oh goodness. Yeah, I mean the subject matter I could tell you about that I read for enjoyment, for professional and personal enlightenment could be its own conversation.
Oh gosh. Oh Jesus.
Like one thing I love, and I'll just share this right now, is that
please.
I think it's before he passed away, that one person I really like is David Bowie,
Okay.
as a musician,
Yes.
I mean, and just the
Bowie was
incredible
a special
diversity.
human being.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And kind of like perpetually in pursuit of new experiences
Mm-hmm.
and new opportunities. I mean, composer, fashion designer, actor, artist. And I read a biography of him, and before he passed away, I think it was before he passed away, but he had identified 100 people in his life, and then identified a book that he felt would be really important for that person
Wow.
to have from David Bowie's own collection.
Oh wow.
And I believe there was an event where like they all assembled, and the books were presented.
Yeah.
So things like that.
Wow.
I don't know where I'm going with it, but
bro, that is that think of the type of human being you had to be to put on an event like that. That is a special human being, right?
Yes,
Like I couldn't
yeah.
even think of that in my wildest dreams. You think anything I'm saying here is crazy? That is a person who is somewhere else.
Oh yeah.
And it's a beautiful thing, right? To see it. Every story I've heard of Bowie, I never followed his music or anything like that. I only knew he was married to, oh gosh, what was the model's name?
Iman.
Iman, yes, right. And
Yeah.
I always thought, wow, what a really interesting pairing of individuals, right?
Yeah.
Like even as a child, I was like, it is two human beings, boy.
Yeah.
And Iman is another person who, again, is just when you hear about her life story and how she talks about herself, like you go like, wow, you are a special human being. So like, yeah, that's really cool, man. Like just to hear stories of like people just doing it, man, and doing it just in ways that just are generated for everybody else. That's a cool story.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Oh,
well,
that's great.
Steve, any last thoughts for, let's call it round 1 of our conversation?
Man, let's just do this again sometime, man. This is cool. I don't know. You might have to keep me on a short leash though, man, for the next conversation, man. If you coming back for more, I mean, I'll just keep talking. So like you're gonna have to figure this out with me.
Well, the nice thing, and I mean this sincerely, the nice thing about the meta content of our conversation is that we still have several questions that we could go through that are about profession and personal and things like that. And that's what I'm trying to do with these interviews, is show the human side of the people in fundraising, as well as the roles they have and the missions they're helping to support.
Absolutely. Professionalism, particularly professionalism, the way we understand it, given we're the same generation, has been horrible for what it means to have to be vulnerable in a workspace with other people, to go back to learn from them. It's been horrible. So it's great to have avenues where people can kind of recognize like, yo, I'm just a human just like you, yo. So
absolutely.
And we don't have to have all this other stuff going on.
Well, that's a very fitting and nice note to end on. I wish we could talk for longer, but I want to be mindful of your time. So Steve, thank you so much. This has been a rich and enthusiastic and really thought-provoking chat today. It's been a lot, so thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, let's just do it again.
Absolutely.
All right, cool.
Well, for our audience, I'm planning to air Steve's interview the first Monday in January of 2023 to start off the new year that way. And you can find his conversation that day. I believe it's January 2nd or 3rd. Let me look at my calendar really quick. It's January 2nd. So Monday, January 2nd. You can find it on LinkedIn as well as on my website, People in Fundraising. Thank you all for listening and watching and for your support. And Steve, let's do this again.
Yeah, Tim. Cool.
Have a great rest of your day.
All right, same to you, Tim.